Welcome to Bicycle Retail Radio, the bicycle industry podcast that brings retailers, vendors, advocates, and thought leaders to the mic for honest discussions about the latest issues facing retailers while taking an in-depth look at the person within the profession.
All right, welcome. I'm Heather Mason, NBDA president. This is the NBDA News Hour, co-hosted with our friends from Human Powered Solutions. Hey, listeners, today we have a new podcast co-host, Mr. Chad Picard, NBDA board member, P2 moderator, will be joining me moving forward for this monthly podcast feature. Welcome, Chad.
Welcome. Thanks for having me aboard.
Yeah, this should be great fun. I love this monthly feature that we do for our members. We are joined today by micromobility experts, Jay Townley, Fred Clements, and Mike Fritz.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm a big fan of the work that the team at Human Powered Solutions, which has over 245 years of experience, considered the data wizards. Their monthly newsletter, the Micromobility Reporter, is a dynamic resource for the industry, featuring timely news and in-depth analysis about the latest in human-powered transportation, including bicycles, e-bicycles, e-scooters, and rideshare. Included is a focus on supply chain issues, technology, and both business and consumer trends that drive the marketplace.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity for us to dive into the Micromobility Reporter. Listen, if you're listening and you have yet to sign up for this free resource, go visit humanpoweredsolutions.com, sign up. You want to get this in your inbox each month.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to dive into the issues that are happening today.
Let's jump into the September newsletter then. This one's titled, Are Teens and E-Bikes a Dangerous Mix? The article that starts us off is from the New York Times. Jay, Mike, Fred, what do we need to know?
Well, I'll kick it off, and then Mike and Fred may want to add in here. But the New York Times we thought was taking a narrow view. And focusing on what is arguably tragedy, but also not looking as some other folks that offered articles up right after the New York Times article appeared, really looking at the whole picture. So the New York Times article made it look like and sound like that this is the fault of a bunch of teenagers riding their e-bikes basically irresponsibly. Now, I can remember when I was a kid, and I will tell you, while we didn't have e-bikes, we rode our bikes irresponsibly. We could have been a lot more disciplined than we were, but that's the nature of young people. And I think that the New York Times, while they were pointing out the bad things that were occurring, they were neglecting a lot of the issues that are associated with this great form of transportation, which is human powered, although it is electric assist, and that's becoming more popular, being far better for the environment and certainly slower than, and I would say no less impolite as many of the vehicular drivers that I see in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's very interesting because the article that followed this in the Reporter was by Electric Micah Toll, and points out, hey, don't blame the e-bikes, blame the cars. There's not enough safe places to ride. Pretty interesting dynamic comparing the two articles, right?
I thought so. And the other piece that I think goes with what Micah Toll is pointing out is that we've got an environment out there that is made worse by the fact that people drive too fast. They drive distracted. This is a common problem that both emerged during, but more after the COVID. And it goes to something that I think the League of American Bicyclists has recognized. And again, Fred may want to comment on this piece, that he and I for years grew up with the the John Forrester approach to safe cycling, which essentially was cyclists would get out there and take the lane because we deserve it. Now, that's got some inherent dangers to it, like getting run over by a pickup truck. But it is not necessarily the ultimate in being able to do what we should be doing. And that is, as a society, slowing down vehicular traffic, creating situations that are respectful to both bicycle riders and pedestrians. And I think Micah Toll does a really good job of pointing out that it's not just bicycles and e-bike riders. It's the fact that on the other side of the equation, there's not enough being done relative to calming traffic, to slowing it down. And I note that the League of American Bicyclists has just started an initiative that'll kick off, I think, in the next 15 days or so with a webinar where they're going to put together a structured program and try to get advocates instead of the John Forrester approach. And I knew John and respected him, but didn't agree with him. So instead of that more stringent take the lane approach, it is to use advocacy in order to slow down traffic. And I see it on my own street. I live in a rural setting, and they've had to put signs out here that warn the vehicular drivers that this is a 35-mile-an-hour road. I can guarantee you that when I walk Precious Pup down that road, there's nobody that passes me that isn't doing probably 10 miles over that limit.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Fred, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think, aside from the first question about teenagers and riding a little recklessly, the ones around here that I see, it's not just their youthful, exuberant attitude. And I don't think it's just me kind of screaming the equivalent of "get off my lawn." It's they're riding out of category bikes. They're popping wheelies at 40 miles an hour. And so they're just kids having fun. It's not their fault, really. It's the industry that can't control cheap imports of out of category e-bikes, I think, that is largely to blame, or at least where we can focus on. But I think this whole e-bike safety thing issue, as long as you take out and don't consider the out of categories, but an e-bike's a bicycle. So it's the same advocacy challenges that we've had all along for regular human-powered only bicycles. And as Jay alluded to, there's a big movement, and it's been traditional and long going. And it's true that we as cyclists have a right to ride. We have a right to the roads. And I think that overlooks the fact that while we have to fight for our rights, it's not always the smartest thing to do. And I think often our answer when someone approaches us with safety concerns, I'm afraid to ride with cars, it's, as Jay said, well, take the lane. And we too often, advocates, mix education and advocacy. They want to fight for the right to the road, but learning how to ride safely means sometimes you don't. And I think it's okay to listen to the consumer and say, you might be right, and maybe to come up with some options. Then take a lane, you wuss. It's just not how I would approach it. When they start to blend advocacy and education, I think it becomes too pedantic and too stringent, and it's the kind of insider club teaching the unwashed their way of looking at the world. So I think we should focus on education and try to remove out and have a separate agenda item for the advocacy. I mean, we hear about bad infrastructure for bicycles. I know the favorite one of many is a bike lane on the inside of parked cars as being an egregious violation. Well, that's advocacy. That's not riding education and learning. So I think as long as we can sort of adapt, use e-bikes as an excuse in a way to sort of reinvigorate bicycle safety and education, it's more than just take the lane and be more aggressive. It's, there are options. You can do that, of course. You can learn how to ride safely. I ride on the street all the time. A lot of people do. I don't judge it unsafe, but a lot of people do. And drivers are getting more distracted, and there are options. You can learn, you can focus on multi-use paths. You don't have to ride with cars, which is something Micah said in another article, or maybe it was this one. You don't ride with cars if you're worried. There's multi-use paths. There's mountain biking. There are less traveled roads. You can use your bicycle and not feel that you have to get out there and fight with cars for the limited space, even though we have a right to do so. And I think respecting those consumer choices and giving options, including training on how to do it better, is probably what I'm hoping anyway, that the e-bike growth and this kind of new attention on safety can pull us out of where we've been in the past on all training and safety and advocacy, and try to separate out advocacy from the education piece.
I'm curious, Fred, from your point of view, the NBDA and HPS are doing so much work to advocate for e-bikes and safety. Are e-bikes important to the industry and retailers of the future?
I think so. There's nothing I can see on the horizon that's going to stop the growth of e-bikes, especially, as Mike will probably talk about later, once we get battery fires under control and once we get safety addressed in a meaningful way, and de minimis keeping cheap exploding e-bikes out of the channel, out of the commerce that we have. I think this does, as I just said, give us a reason to refocus on education. I see nothing that's going to stop the growth of e-bikes going forward, except for those issues that I just cited.
Staying on the e-bikes, the article from BBC pointing out the increase in e-bike battery fires is prompting a call for better regulation. Interesting read, pointing out even a suggestion of the UK adapting some of what we have witnessed in New York City. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Count me in. We've been advocating for standards for high energy e-bike battery packs for some time now, because as we've said so many times, there's so much energy in that battery pack. I keep drawing the analogy to gasoline. Cars drive around with a lot of potential energy in that gas tank, but e-bikes are doing it now too, because we simply need that much energy to make for a practical commuting vehicle. So, and the other point that's become so clear is that substandard battery packs are dangerous. There needs to be a bar set that anything that doesn't comply with the state of the art in terms of reliable, safe battery packs needs to be expunged from the marketplace and precluded from ever coming back, because these things can hurt people. That said, again, there's also a very important requirement that we educate. Education has to go hand in hand with regulation, because as I've said, even the best battery pack in the whole wide world can still fail if it's not properly used and maintained, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward. Let's require quality battery packs for our commuting methodology of choice here, to make sure that, in fact, we're safe and reliable in that regard. So, no argument for me. I think there ought to be standards imposed worldwide, because, again, an unsafe battery pack will hurt people.
Yeah, Chad, I'm so glad you brought up that article about the UK. We're doing a lot of work here. We recently just hosted our e-bike safety forum panel. And we actually had a question that we weren't able to cover in that meeting. And Mike, I think this is as good a time as any. The question was specifically to e-bike batteries. We know that e-bike batteries have a lifespan. We know that batteries need to be replaced. And then sometimes people try to refurbish them, which we know that any refurbishment or tampering is just a recipe for disaster. For our retailers who are listening, for everyone listening, how do we know if an e-bike battery comes into our store that it has been refurbished or tampered with? Is there any indicators that we could look out for that would be, yeah?
This was an interesting topic that was discussed at the CPSC hearing back in July. Is there some way that we can put in some sort of a methodology that will indicate that a battery pack has been tampered with? And there are ways of doing that. A lot of the manufacturers that I've worked with over in the past they'll put little telltales on the battery, such as a sticker that once it's removed indicates, leaves a residue that indicates that there was a sticker there that has been disrupted for some reason or other, implying that the pack has been opened and presumably tampered with. There needs to be some methodology. I'm not sure that I would advocate hermetically sealed battery packs because there are, qualified battery service stations can safely service a battery pack, and that would require access to it. But, the key word there is qualified. Having spent a lot of time in battery pack manufacturing facilities, I have an acute appreciation of all of the protocols and all of the precautions that go into making sure that a battery pack is safe for its intended use. And the likelihood that some of these fly-by-night outfits can do that kind of work without the equipment or training necessary to make sure that it's done right is unlikely. Therefore, at the present time, I think we as an organization advocate that when a battery pack reaches the end of its useful life, it be recycled and replaced. Now, the downside to that is that a good battery pack is expensive, and at the present time, there's no getting around that. Hopefully, as electric vehicles in general proliferate throughout our society, and not only electric bikes, but electric automobiles and other transportation modalities continue to proliferate into society, the price of this battery technology will start to decline. There have been some very positive announcements in the recent past. There's a lot of concern about the availability and cost of the rare earth materials, the elements that go into a battery pack, and there's been a huge lithium deposit just recently discovered in the continental United States, which is really good news, because lithium obviously is a key ingredient to manufacturing those packs. So as long as there's not acute shortages of the key materials that go into these packs, the prices should stabilize and hopefully at some point start coming down until, we find the next high energy, high power storage medium, that will supersede lithium-ion batteries in the future. But no, refurbished battery packs. Again, the only people that I would trust at the present time to refurbish a pack is either a battery pack manufacturer or a duly authorized service shop that has that capability. But at the present time, you just need to be careful. We've talked about this in the past, that when a person goes to replace the battery for his electric bike, that they get it from the source that they purchased the bike from in the first place. Because not only does that ensure that it's a quality battery pack, it also ensures that the mechanisms that it connects to, the bike's electrical system and critically the battery charger, are compatible as well, which will go a long way to ensuring that, that's a safe arrangement.
Thank you, Mike.
To stay here, there was an article on Ebike promoting UL 2849 certification. Do you guys expect more to follow the certification process?
Yeah, Mike. No, Mike. I echo Mike's feelings on this, and he may have additional comment. But Ebike is not a mainstream brand. In fact, I think, Mike, if I'm correct, you'll probably find it more as a D2C than anywhere else. So I think what they've done is begun to use compliance and testing and compliance to certification, to UL 2849, as a marketing tool. So, Chad, I think this is a really important turning point, because after this article came out, we saw several more in the weeks that followed the end of August going into September, and they're bigger and bigger brands. So I think the point is that Ebike, using UL 2849 and testing and certification the same as a marketing tool. Hey, look at us, we're certified, which is right. That's the safe thing to do. Kind of belays the comments that we're seeing out in the marketplace, where the big brands, who I won't hesitate to say, made, I think, pretty good bucks during the COVID, during the pandemic are saying, well, we can't afford that. We can't afford the testing. We can't afford the certification. Ebike's making a statement. Obviously, folks that want to sell safe and as reliable a product as can be brought to market are willing to put the money into making sure that they are meeting the standards, getting tested to the standards, and providing certification to those standards.
I wholeheartedly agree with Jay, and I think that's a smart move from a marketing perspective. I harken back to my former boss, Lee Iacocca. Iacocca was the first one that advertised safety in automobiles. Prior to Iacocca's taking the initiative, nobody wanted to brag about the fact they had seatbelts. Which clearly is a very important, effective safety device for their cars. I think safety sells, especially in light of the situation in New York City and all the adverse publicity that e-bikes as a product category has received during the course of this New York City crisis. I mean, we in the industry understand that there is a specific reason why these particular bikes fail on a regular basis, incurring injury, property damage, and deaths. But I think your average consumer doesn't appreciate that, and they've got to have it at the back of their mind that buying one of these devices runs a certain risk, and for a manufacturer to be able to advertise and promote the fact that they've taken the appropriate steps to ensure that their bike is in fact safe for its intended use is a very positive and hopefully very effective marketing tool in terms of promoting their brand.
Yeah, and if I might just quickly add, I think this is the best case scenario of where the competitive nature of our companies comes into play, where, as Mike just said, this becomes a marketing tool. So yeah, we're pushing for regulation, for CPSC standards and the UL certification. Parallel is companies competing with each other for the consumer's attention and to make them feel better about their products. And so to me, the more that can use this as marketing, it works into the competitive nature of our industry. It's perfect.
So, Fred, you mentioned marketing as a reason for getting certification, UL certification. Are there other pressures coming from either within the industry or outside the industry that is, getting manufacturers to look at their product and say, hey, we need to step it up a little bit?
Well, I think it's happening. I really do. The CPSC hearing was very high profile. The manufacturer supplier organization, People for Bikes, was there. Obviously, NBDA was there. I think with all the publicity, it's hard not to see it. And so UL seems to be an excellent standard. It's getting some traction, and I hope they succeed and we all succeed as a result.
Well, and I think there's also, Chad, the sad piece that goes with this, and that's New York and what's happening in New York. Those of us at the hearing, those of us tapping into that hearing, I'm sure will remember Commissioner Kavanaugh making the statement at the end of her testimony that she declared a state of emergency. Mike, if I'm correct, City of New York through this date have already had 14 fatalities directly attributable to lithium-ion batteries. And while people in our industry will say, well, they're not all e-bikes, some of them are. And if you stop and take a count, is a significant enough quantity of e-bikes involved in those 14 fatalities that that to me, in my mind, and I'm an old safety advocate from way back, is enough. UL 2849 is an absolute complete standard that the industry, the bike industry, participated in developing from 2018 through 2020. It's been amended, and so we know that it's been updated. It includes 2271, which is the battery standard, UL 2271, which again should be part and parcel of how an e-bike brand looks at bringing a product to market, where their battery and their complete propulsion system, all 5 key elements of that propulsion system, have been tested and certified, and they can provide a proper certificate of compliance, which is part and parcel of doing business. It's no different than meeting the mandatory federal bicycle safety regulation in my mind.
And Jay, to further that, And you made the point, the bike industry was instrumental in doing this. A lot of people claim that, UL has written this standard and imposed it such that the industry has to comply. UL didn't write anything. UL coordinated the development of the standard and UL promulgated the standard, but bike industry initially wrote it. And that was exactly the same scenario that we experienced back in the early 70s with CPSC. If an agency independent of the industry writes a standard, in all likelihood, it's neither going to be effective nor workable. But when the industry itself develops the standard with the insight and experience that they've had vis-a-vis their own products, then it should be a pretty good standard. And I think that's the case that we have with 2849 and 2271. We know it's workable. The industry essentially signed off on it. There seems to be a lot of resistance that come up since then, but the bottom line is given the nature of these products, the safety standard is certainly appropriate and called for.
Yeah, I do love the question, where is the pressure coming from? And immediately I thought of New York City and these brands who are investing in e-bikes for the future and the long term, see the value in getting this certification. We look at Flyer, we look at Rad. I mean, it's important, not only because is it helping people stay safe, but it's ensuring the future growth of this side of the industry and sales. And if I'm going to be totally transparent, and I'd call this investigative news hour, I'm hearing that some brands aren't putting value in the certification because they feel that they can just sell into New Jersey. So they can't sell into New York City anymore. So they'll take their sales to retailers in New Jersey, which is very disheartening. And it's a whole nother podcast, but not
How irresponsible is that? I mean,
not the right way to handle this. So I guess while we're on this subject, I'll just congratulate Mike. I know you were, Mike Fritz, were appointed to 2 technical committees at UL dealing with the e-bike safety. And it's great to have you on the team. And you're really, truly an expert. And I just want to give you public acknowledgement for that as well. Congratulations.
thanks, Heather. I appreciate that. I really hope this is an opportunity to strengthen or fortify the industry's role in terms of ongoing refinement, if you will, of these standards, such that they continue to be effective and workable for everybody involved. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to hopefully making some meaningful contributions to the effort.
And anyone who's listening to this podcast who is a brand or supplier and is interested in UL certification, the steps involved, we will happily take a call and connect you to the right people. Mike, Jay, and myself are advocates for this, so please reach out. I want to shift just a little bit, focusing on the state of the industry. So the Micromobility Reporter this past month was just chock full of different articles that talked about imports and just the state of the industry. Before I get into the articles specifically, Fred, from where you're sitting, your past multiple years as NBDA president, working with so many retailers, the role that you have now working with Humans Powered Solutions. What do you think about the state of the industry, the retailers? Do you think that we're in healthy times?
I wish you wouldn't ask me, but since you did, in past years, I'd be happy to address this question, but this year, no, not so much. It's not a healthy situation. It's a kind of a perfect storm. I've used that phrase before, but with so much inventory hanging and the seasonality of our business where we have a short time frame to make the sales that we need, and then floor traffic down the way it's been, and then the spigot turns off, and we've still got inventory, and it increases the tension with suppliers because they have to try to move inventory in some way. You got angry customers because the prices were high during the COVID with the extra shipping and other things. And then, the money just isn't flowing like we had hoped. So that doesn't mean every retailer is in terrible shape, but it kind of reinforces that you really need to keep a tight watch on your business and your personal inventory and try to be realistic in your forecasting. In my mind, retailers may disagree, but better to lose a sale here and there than to have too much inventory that you can't sell and then you have to sell at a discount. But so yeah, it's a tough time right now from what I'm hearing.
Fred, I really appreciate your viewpoint on that and sharing that with our listeners. I guess now let's dive into a couple of specific articles. For me, I want to start bicycle retailer industry news. There was an article about bike imports plummeting as average values climbed. I know this report left off e-bikes. What do retailers need to know? Maybe Jay, you want to dive into this? I know the data is really your powerhouse here.
Well, and going back pre-COVID, as Fred will attest, because we did this for decades, you waited till you got the report on imports, and that basically told you what was happening in the market, because we're an import-dependent industry. And I'll repeat that. Even in a time when there are many powers that be would like us to reshore, resource, near source, friend source, you've still got the vast majority of bicycles sold in this country through last year and up to the present month are imported. And the vast majority of those, like 88, 89%, are coming from mainland China. That's simply the nature of our supply chain at this point. So the data that Brain published in the article was excellent, but you're correct. It didn't include e-bikes. And Heather, this goes to something you and Chad and Michael have heard me talk about before, going back to your April summit in Bentonville, and that is what we don't know. And so the American bicycle industry today, as we speak, has some certainties, which is acoustic or pedal bicycles are still clocked in through the customs system, through the HTS, Harmonized Tariff Schedule numbers, and we can track those. And so the article is all about the numbers, which are way down. And it's not because e-bikes are way up. It's because the market is down. There's a lot of inventory here. What brands and manufacturers, importers all do is when you got a lot of inventory sitting in a warehouse ready to sell to the marketplace, what do? You cut down on what you're buying to bring into that warehouse. You don't buy the imports. You push it back. You push back the componentry. What that data shows is scary, as Fred says. Imports of regular acoustic bikes are, if you recall, at the lowest level since 2016, 2018 at the max, not even back to 2019. But it's in line with what we see as plateaus. This industry hasn't had a lot of ups and downs except for economic disruption till we got to the COVID. And that has been, I think, mislabeled as a bike boom, but it certainly was a surge. And so we know how the acoustic bikes are doing. We've got an idea of how e-bikes are doing, but that to me is a huge gap that we as an industry can't really talk intelligently about what's occurring in the market and what's going to occur going forward until we get our arms around and are able to deal with the number, the exact accurate number of e-bikes being imported. And that's the bulk that come into this country, along with the componentry, because what's called bicycle manufacturing in this country is really assembly. So the components are coming in and bikes are being assembled here. What is interesting to me about the current situation is numbers are way down in response to the fact that there's a huge inventory overhang, but the value went up appreciably. So the first thing you look at is, wow, that's e-bikes. It's not. E-bikes weren't counted. So what's going on with the value situation here? I don't believe, because you look at this by category, I don't believe this is all upper end anything. I think what you're looking at is the end result of pricing. Now, some of it is cost, but I can tell you right now, it's not freight. Freight costs are as low as they've been since 2018, 2019. If we want to bring a 40-footer into this country now full of bicycles, we can do that for $2,000 in round numbers, which is what it was back in 2019. Some of it's labor, but not a huge amount. Some of it's material. Probably that's the bigger piece. Material costs have gone up. But I think what we have to look at here is what's going on within the channel of trade. And so in general terms, I'll label this as surge pricing. During the COVID, we could, and we haven't quite let go of it yet. Where it's biting us as an industry is the sales and the discounts. where we're driving down, taking off for retail, letting the consumer get a deal. I mean, the last ones I saw, which were the end of last week, were 40, 50, 60, 70% off. I was on the phone just before this podcast started with a longtime rep, goes back to the Schwinn days, but he's active in the upper Midwest. And he assures me that's still going on. So what the import data, I'm prattling on here on a number of things, but what the import data is showing us is an industry that has too much inventory, is trying to deal with it by shutting down or not buying from our supply sources, and also an industry that is still increasing price. Now, where that goes relative to the consumer, we don't have the data to dig into. I think NBDA is thinking about how you're going to get that information, but I think we also may have scared off some of our consumers by simply presenting them with product at too high a price for their pocketbook.
Interesting.
If any of that makes sense.
While talking about imports, there's two articles mentioning China, one on the economy and the other from the Wall Street Journal on the persistent downturn of trade. What can we learn from China?
A lot, I think. First of all, I think it starts with a realization that all our big brands are multinationals. Trek, Specialized, Giant certainly is, Cannondale. Those brands are all multinationals. They all sell at retail in Europe and China. So China is both the source of product, where we go to get our products for the American market. We do not make bicycles here anymore. That doesn't mean I don't think we should, but we don't. We assemble bikes, but in small quantities compared to what we import. But the simple fact here is relative to the products that we've got in the country is we're importing a product, moving it through a channel of trade from a multinational brand who is also very dependent upon the European and the Chinese retail markets. The best example, because out of the top four, by the way, only one of them is a public company. Trek, Specialized, PON, who owns Cannondale, are privately held companies. They do not have to disclose numbers and don't, or data. Giant, however, is a public company. So they have to publish monthly, quarterly, half-year financial reports. And the latest we have is half-year. And what it states, and these are rough numbers, I don't have them exactly in front of me, but I think I'm pretty close, is that Giant was down about 15% in revenue in Europe. Their European sales were off about 15%. North America, the United States, was off over 70%. And the market in China for them at retail was up over 70% over previous quarter. So their overall for Giant, as the Giant group, their revenue is down 5%. This is the combination of being down in Europe, down in the US, but up in China. Now, why is China important to us? I think much the same thing has occurred with the other multinationals. Down in Europe, down in the US, up in China. And we now have a situation where China economically is in trouble. The consumer market is dropping like a rock. Consumers in China, like some of the consumers in this country and some of the consumers in Europe, aren't buying. And if that's occurring, and again, this is theory, I think what we'll see is Q3 and second half numbers coming from at least Giant to give us an idea of how the other multinationals are doing that may show that 5% that they've got as they're only down 5% because they were up so high in China will be a thinner or possibly a more red number because their Chinese sales have diminished as the market has been undercut and consumers in China are no longer buying. Now that's only part of it, but that we can get into all sorts of other issues relative to the politics involved in the geopolitical situation. But for the bike industry, I think that gives you a bit of an overview. Why is China important? Because we sell a lot of our brand, what we consider our multinational brands are sold in China. And if they're not buying them, it's going to affect the overall financials of these companies.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're gonna need to keep our eyes on, and it's like a developing situation that I know Jay and we almost talk about weekly. The future of the industry looks still a little scary. It's a little shaky to me, and I'm not honestly loving this conversation. We started out talking about just the health of retailers, and now just talking about imports. It's nerve-wracking on multiple levels. And then if you look at the article in Forbes, Carlton Reed almost jokingly, I'd call it, pointing fun, points out that the cycling industry has collapsed. I mean, are we agreeing with the summary in his article?
Well, Carlton's been around a long time. Yeah, Carlton's been around a long time, and I'll certainly let Fred comment on this. Carlton has been within the industry, Fred. I think it's fair to state that Carlton has been one of those people that has been writing primarily for the consumer publications for 3 decades at this point. He is when we had trade shows here, he was always at the trade shows. He got a little bit of publication in the trades, but mostly he's been a consumer writer, consumer publication writer. And he landed this gig as a senior specialist, a senior writer for Forbes. So he's their go-to guy for the bicycle business. Again, he's European, which I don't hold against him. He's English, which I don't hold against him. But he certainly doesn't have, I think, a really good view of the United States, except as he would get that from sitting in the UK, which isn't complete if you're not doing business here. So I don't know if he mixes up the situation. I wanted to cover that article because of what he said and how he attributes the experts in this country simply stating it's going to come back. And I think sooner than reality, because I don't think he reads the market properly. But Fred, what's your comments?
Well, as Heather said, he was maybe a little tongue-in-cheek about collapse, but I guess if you're a retailer or a supplier company during these difficult times that is squeezed out, in your world, it's a collapse. But I don't see the major companies in our industry collapsing, and I don't see the fundamentals yet being shaken to their core. I don't see anything other than we need to weather the storm for the next year or two with inventory, and I think participation continues solidly, and the industry may have to reformat itself in some ways, but I think collapse is a bit of hyperbole.
So looking forward to the future, we've got all these bike companies that are cutting back on production because of they're sitting on a bunch of inventory. Are there risks in losing relationships with manufacturers in China that'll be tough to get production time in the future? So maybe 2 years down the road, we need more bikes. Are those relationships lost to maybe healthier industries that battled the COVID years a little better with their inventory?
Well, I think the relation, you're right. I mean, it's a relational question, but let's go to another writer that's looked at as a pundit in the industry, Mark Sani. And Mark has opined that we are no longer a relationship-based industry. I think he's correct. We become a transactional industry, very much so. Chad, back when I was involved in buying, and when Mike was with the same company that I worked for, it was all about relationships. To the point where when I was vice president of purchasing at Schwinn, I was on the road every month for 10 to 11 months out of the year. And we went to Europe, we traveled in Taiwan, eventually China, Hong Kong, and all of that was relationship. It was all sitting down face to face, because the Chinese like to do business with you face to face. That, I think, is what this, if you will, it's like a freight train. We went full speed, and then all of a sudden we started to stop, and you could hear the cars banging into each other. The big brands, including the big retailers, Walmart, Target, Trek, Specialized, are all buying from sources in China. Now, they are different plants. I will attest to this, that you don't buy a dealer specialty bicycle. You don't buy an REI bike, as an example, in the same plant or from the same vendor you buy a Walmart bike from. There's different manufacturing methods, including welding methods that are used. But it's still a relationship. And I think that's what's being hurt here, because in order to do what they're doing, which is cut back as much as we saw in those charts that Brain published, you have to send. You're sitting in front of the folks over in China, or the companies that own and operate the Chinese plants in Taiwan, and you're saying to them, I'm canceling orders. I'm pulling these POs. I'm not going to buy this stuff. Sell it to somebody else. And in a lot of cases, those vendors have gone ahead, those OEMs, original manufacturing companies, it's a network. The way it operates is they've all got sub-vendors. They've all got suppliers. I mean, we know about the big guys, Shimano, SRAM, but there's a lot of other people in that mix. And so they've got inventory. They bought stuff in anticipation of making bikes. And so you're hurting relationships. And most of the people in the bike business can't make other stuff. I mean, this is it's purpose-built machinery, equipment, and lines. Now, a bicycle manufacturer can do e-bikes. A bicycle manufacturer can do fitness equipment, because we've seen that and we've helped some of them convert to it. But there's some limitation. Maybe they can do scooters, I don't know. But there's a limitation. They can't get into heavy steel. They can't get into heavy machinery. They're not going to make refrigerators, air conditioners. There's certain things that they just can't get into. So I think that's the big risk. I think that's what Bob Markovicius stays awake, and you can ask him at night about, is maintaining his relationships that have been built up over the years in an environment where, and Bob knows this, Mark Sani knows this, I think Fred also is aware of this, Mike certainly, because he deals with the vendor community. He just came back from Taiwan. We've gone from what was a very strong relational arrangement, relationship-based businesses. We've now gone to transactional businesses, which is IT, which is cold, which is pick up the phone and tell them we're going to cancel the order instead of flying over there and sitting down and explaining to them. You'll get the same response from them. They're not going to like it. But to explain to them in person why I'm canceling the order.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's dive into Rick Vosper's article, Midsummer Blues at Retail. I think Rick does his usual thorough job of logically presenting the details, and in this case, the grim facts of where the American specialty retail channel is and where it's probably headed. Jay, can you add some more?
Well, and I think Fred can chime in on this too, and probably Heather. What I read is Rick is pretty much peeling back and telling the truth. He's looking at, the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. He is kind of boiling this down to what I've seen other folks opine about in the business, and that is that our major brands, the bike brands, have gone to D2C components of their business, direct to consumer. In talking to Chuck Sikora, who is my contact as a rep up in the Midwest, Chuck had told me a story about visiting with a dealer who, while they were there, a UPS truck delivered 4 top-tier brand bikes to him. And Chuck said, why are you taking those in? He said, well, those are the dealer said, those are D2C. I'm assembling them. And so they ran through the math of what that meant. But this evidently is becoming a growing part of certain brands' business with dealers. The product's delivered. The dealer's job is to assemble it. They get paid a flat fee for that, not the margin on selling it. They get a flat fee for the assembly and either deliver it to and get paid for delivery to a consumer. The consumer comes in and picks it up. That to me, by the way, is a transactional business relationship, not a personal business relationship. So that is a little bit, I think, of what the peel back is, that Rick is pointing out, that we've got major brands in the market that have bought up retail stores. They now own, and I think his percentage was, Heather, check me on this, 8-9%, up to 10% of retail stores owned by 4 brands. The bulk of them, by the way, by 1 brand, who Rick has put numbers to in past articles. And it's their business plan. It's the way they see the future. It's how they're dealing with margin issues. So I believe, sadly, that is a portion of the specialty bike retail business. But Chad, you know from personal experience, and Heather's been a store owner. I mean, if I remember right, you recently owned 5 stores, and correct, 5?
3 stores.
3. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Pretend you own 5.
Sure. Felt like
So,
5 sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and the 3, you're a multi-store owner. So you know what it takes to run that kind of business. You know what relationship you got with the brands. You know what kind of relationship you got with the consumer. What I'm trying to get at here is that I think that a portion of the industry is going to go to the combination model, which is essentially brand owned and a D2C component to it. And you're going to have a portion of the industry, which could be a third to a half, depending on what the future holds, of truly independents, IBDs, independent dealers who will not be dependent upon an authorized dealer agreement, will not be tied and bound by the hip in a legal agreement to a brand, who will have the relationship with the consumer and will be part and parcel of a community of interest that will include a growing number of consumers who want that kind of relationship, not the least of which is circular economies, recycling, all of the things that the bicycle needs to add, and the e-bike, by the way, inclusive in this, I think needs to add to the equation to be truly more acceptable to the younger generation of riders coming up. So I think Rick is right in pointing out what that portion that will be the brand owned piece is, the 4.0. But I think where we have to go is, what's that chunk that is truly independent? How are they going to move forward in the market? How are they going to serve the consumer better? How are they going to become the specialty bike retailer of choice?
Really interesting conversation. There's a lot going on right now, and I think we could even spend 2 hours in this news hour talking about this. I don't want to leave this so grim, though, and I saw the article about Ace Hardware aiming for 170 new shops by the end of this year. And I know that Ace Hardware is the largest dealer-owned retail hardware business in the US. Proving that local service-based hardware stores remain relevant. So I want to just have hope and, really point out that local service-based bicycle retailers, local retailers who connect with their community, local retailers who promote fabulous products and get behind products that support their business. I mean, I think there's still hope. I hope the consensus of everyone on this call would agree.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that that's a good example, is that article. I mean, that's the reason it was in this month's newsletter, is you've got a very large and also highly rated dealer-owned organization in the True Value Hardware organization. The bulk of those stores are owned by the individual store owners. They're like individual bike shops. Now, it's a different merchandise line. They're hardware stores. But yeah, I think there is the hope. The co-ops have never taken off here relative to dealers, but that very well might be the kind of economic model in the future for that 1/3 or that 1/2 of the dealers that will be independents. There's no reason that they got to float out there alone.
Mm-hmm.
There's the True Value example. And look at that article. It says about the returns and the monies and what was paid out to the owners, who are the individual store owners that are members of that association. Look at a couple other big organizations like that are dealer owned and operated, and also the buying groups, which are big in the ski business and other sectors of the sporting goods marketplace. I think there's not only an opportunity, I think there's huge hope for dealer operated, dealer owned, and quite frankly, we've talked about this before. They're just very quiet. You've got organizations, you and your P2 groups, I'm sure, run across this, or you could ask the question of your top tier P2 group. I think you'll find there's a network there of a number of those retailers that actually are buying product under a brand and bringing it into the country. There are dealers that work together now, do it in a legal process in a legal way. They're the beginnings, and I think dealers are smart. So I think there's every opportunity, and True Value should be a beacon for especially bicycle retailers to aspire to.
Yeah. Well, so, listeners, like, we barely dove in to the Micromobility Reporter this month, and we just covered a couple articles in the conversation today. If you haven't signed up for that report directly to your inbox each month, do so today. You can also view it on the Human Powered Solutions website. Let's wrap this up then. We always do this specific advice for our listeners for the month ahead. Looking at October 2023, Fred, I know you love this question each month. I know you do. So I'm going to start with you. You do a lot of work with the Small Business Rising. You've been involved in the industry for many years. We know about the current state of the industry. I know you look at other industries. Where do you think retailers should be focused for October 2023?
Well, the group Small Business Rising had two previous iterations, and the NBDA was one of the co-founding organizations at first, with they call Advocates for Independent Retail. And the idea is similar brick and mortar style local business industries have a lot in common agenda. The advantages of buying local. This can be marketed. This can be something you can advocate for in legislation. Small business has a purpose, a real reason, an economic reason in communities. And so that's, I think, looking at other industries, booksellers, specialty toy stores were part of the founding group in this. I think that's all, not that we don't have enough to do on our agenda, but looking at similar industries and find areas of common interest. It's kind of like an association for industries that's focused on small business. In terms of where, as Heather kind of indicated, I'm not really comfortable advising dealers on anything because I don't consider myself an expert. But I was talking to a bike shop friend of mine in the Midwest last week, and he was recounting trying to sell a bike to someone, and that person stopped him and said, "Before we go any further, I want to know what your politics are." And he's, "Well, I'm an independent," he said. Well, I don't know if that's good enough. And so they went on and on a little bit about that. But and so this fellow's, the dealer's idea is this next year, it's election season. We're going to have an election. People are polarized. They're angry. And this is going to keep happening. And it's only going to get worse. And so I think that's, if I would try to give any advice, is to kind of look at that and plan ahead a little bit, because you're going to get this, I suspect. And I know this dealer is definitely concerned about it because he's already had a little bit of it. Maybe it's a good time to kind of think it through a little bit in your own head, and to communicate with your staff, because the old phrase that we used to use and probably still do, bicycles are bike partisan. We don't have a political agenda one side or the other. In fact, we're a solution. One of my pet theories is a lot of the polarization, the problem isn't really the issues, it's the anger. And to address anger, get on a bike, and it's not the only solution or anything, but I think that just to prepare and think about the political situation and how this tension is just going to keep going and how you as a bike retailer and as the bike business offer hope.
Love that answer.
Jay, where do you think suppliers should be focused?
Well, first of all, I agree with Fred 100%, and I think a little bit of that shifts over to the supply side. I'm more hopeful that dealers will understand Fred's message, less hopeful that suppliers will, but I hope suppliers understand it and try to embrace it. I think suppliers at this side have to deal with reality, looking at the reality of the market, looking at what they can do to help their customers, and I think above all, communicate with us, with their supply sources, their supply chain. Supply becomes extremely important, but as I said earlier, it is to me still a relational business, still a relationship business. And the other goes to employees. Sitting down and being honest with employees, talking to employees about on a regular basis about the business, where the business is going, what the employees can contribute and are contributing to that business. And then, with the customer side, outward facing, same thing, is communicate. And data is going to become more and more important on the supply side, both IT and how it's used relative to improving the inventory management and also the order processing, and then back upstream, how it's going to contribute to proper ordering and making sure that you got the right amount of inventory when the customer needs it. So that is goes to the issue of take a look at where you need to make smart investments. What you could afford, can't afford everything. Take a look at the smart investments that'll make you a better business serving your retail customers in a better way.
Fantastic. Let's close it out. Mike, overall focus in regard to e-bikes?
I talk a lot about batteries because that's obviously a big issue. I'm hopeful in the future I'll be able to give you some insight into some of the new technologies that are in the pipeline that are going to affect bikes and specifically e-bikes in the future. The one that I'm most excited about right now is IoT, the Internet of Things. There's a lot of work being done by a lot of different companies to connect our bikes to the cloud and offer all sorts of really neat functionality and benefit associated with that. But as far as today's conversation goes, I'd just like to close by making a statement. I'm hearing rumblings from the field that a lot of people are tending to discount the severity of the issue with the lithium-ion batteries. Some people are basically hanging all of their faith on the fact that they're buying from reputable vendors. And that certainly is a big step in the right direction. I mean, buying a quality bike with a quality battery from a quality brand is certainly a humongous step in the right direction. But that does not guarantee that you're not going to have an issue. And again, I'll reiterate it. Even the best battery pack in the world will fail under the right circumstance, which makes it incumbent on both dealers, or primarily on dealers, to ensure that their treatment and maintenance of lithium-ion batteries in their inventory is appropriate and following well-understood protocols associated with storage and charging, etc. And then also it's their responsibility to teach their customers. Just an anecdote: I do product liability defense work from time to time, and I'm aware of a e-bike fire case right now that with a reputable brand that's oftentimes cited for their high quality and high safety, that was charged with an improper charger. And guess what? Even the high quality battery failed. So it's not something we can take lightly, even if we're dealing with reputable manufacturers. So you need to be aware of the issues. You need to understand how to best deal with it. A lot of people say, well, I've never had a problem in the past. That doesn't guarantee you're not going to have a problem in the future. So please know and understand what you need to do to take care of your shop and your customers. We're here to help. Obviously, we work on this a lot. We've got a lot of good insight. We network with people that are most expert in these fields on a regular basis. We're here to help. So be careful with those battery packs. Do the right thing, and believe me, everybody can live long and happy lives with their e-bikes.
Yes, Mike, thanks again for that reminder. Such a wealth of information. Can't thank you guys enough for coming on and sharing your expertise with our listeners. so that they are able to stay up to date on important topics facing our bike industry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners. If you like this episode, don't forget to share with your friends on social media. Leave a review. We appreciate it. And we'll see you back here next month.
Thank you for listening to Bicycle Retail Radio. This podcast is designed specifically for the bicycle industry, dedicated to strengthening our retailers and cycling community. If it is your first episode, we urge you to take the time and listen to our past episodes.